mmoja wa wanafunzi wetu wa zamani ambaye aliwahi kuwa waziri kwa miaka mingi Kenya hii.
Maseno, you may or may not be aware, but Maseno was one of the earliest schools ever established in Kenya. When was Maseno established? 1906. And when it was established, what was the function of Maseno in 1906? What was the purpose of Maseno in 1906? It had been established for Sons of African Chiefs, but they very quickly realized that Kenya is not like Uganda, because they had been building. I see there are some people at the door. Karibuni, karibuni, have a seat and learn from the rest. Wameogopa. So it had been modeled around Uganda. So the British had been in Uganda for a while. They had set up systems, governance systems, administrative systems in Uganda for a while. And so once they had accomplished that, then they were thinking of expanding their control and their role into Kenya. And so they thought that a model that had worked very well in Uganda, anybody here who's ever heard of King's College Budo? Anybody's ever heard of anything like that? So those are some of the schools that had been established by the British in Uganda. So they came over to Kenya and they figured we could also establish schools like that. So, but very quickly they realized that Kenya is a different country from Uganda. And so the project of just educating African chiefs slowly went by the wayside. And in time, by the time Dr. William Odongo Mamo comes on the scene, it had been opened up for, different cadres. It is basically the people who are now then likely to get education are people who are aware of the different tests, the examinations needed to be done, the importance of getting an education, because when Dr. William Odongo Mamo was getting an education, it was not obvious that it's very important to get an education. In fact, there's a very interesting story about how he went to class. The first time he went to class, he was almost completely naked. The relevance and the bigger import of this story for me was how hard there's several generations of people around the Maseno area and the wider Nyanza area, how hard they worked for several generations to establish the roots of education in Western Kenya. That is something that I have taken from this book that is very valuable to me, because even as I engage in public policy issues and help to guide the future of education in other arenas, I think there's a lot to learn from the roots of education in a place like this. Dr. Dongo, for example, had to walk up to 62 kilometers to come to Maseno. Now, the other thing, one of the other important things is that I learned from reading this book is the dense networks. So, for example, the first class in Maseno that did A-levels, his son is going to elaborate on that a little bit more. The first class that did A-levels had 16 students. And out of those 16 students, 5 of them became cabinet ministers. And then six of them, who are not part of these 5, became professors. So can you imagine how influential that class must have been? This book is not just about the past, okay? That's my firm belief. If this book had just been about just learning about the past and stories of our grandfathers and our grandfathers' peers who don't matter anymore, it would not have been interesting to me, and I don't think it would be interesting to you. Is that right? So this book, for me, is more than just about the past. It's also a challenge to the future. Because what this book tells me, and when I read this book and understood it and got to learn all these lessons from the school, from the history of Dr. William Odongo Mamo, it challenged me. It challenged me to start thinking, okay, what about the future? And some of the questions that it challenged me to ask about the future is to ask, for institutions like Maseno School that have been at the forefront of bringing education to Kenya, what role are they going to play in the future of education?
Good evening, everyone. The Asante Sana is the last Kiswahili you'll hear me speak here today. I'm not very good at Kiswahili, so pardon me. My name is Robert Omamo. You heard Mr. Okach call me Bob. Bob just comes from, it's short form for Robert. And I'm happy to be here today. I could say I'm happy to be back home. I'll say back home in Maseno, because even though I wasn't a student here, there's a big, big history that we have in the family with regard to Maseno. My father went through this school, I'm not sure if you know your history, but Maseno School used to have the primary section within the compound here. So my father, back in 1943, joined Maseno School in class 4, and he left in 1949 when he was done with his O-levels. So the correction is that there was no A-levels then. He was in the pioneer O-level class of Maseno, a class that had very many eminent people that came out of it, as Isaac mentioned, with 5 cabinet ministers and 6 professors out of the class of 16 people only. So one of the reasons why I'm here is concerning this book, The Path to KALIECH. The Path to KALIECH is the autobiography that my dad wrote, which he wrote over 20 years. And even by the time he passed on in the year 2010, he wasn't done writing the book. So I took the challenge to release it. So I released it late last year. And I felt that to honor him, it would be good to come to the place that shaped his life, because Maseno School shaped his life. You'll get to see when you get to read the book how big a deal it was to get to Maseno. You should not take it for granted when you're in this school, when you look at the history of the school. And I just wanted to encourage you that as you move along and as you plan to leave the school when you're done with Form 4, you should maintain your networks and join the networks of Maseno out there. Because if you have a strong old boy community, you can always tap into it. And that is something that has always been there in this school for many years ago. Another thing I wanted to mention to you is that you need to always learn about the history and the struggles people went through to just get an education. And never take it for granted when you're in Maseno School. My friend, the videographer here, Albert, is also an old boy of Maseno. He'll tell you how big a deal it was when he was here. Was it in the 70s? I think it was the 90s anyway. He was here in the 90s. So you should know that this is a school with so much history. So this book here, I said I'm at home. I'm feeling at home because my grandfather also came to Maseno School in the 20s, believe it or not. He was here in the 20s. And his brother, my grand-uncle, who was called Robert Angawa, who I'm named after, also came to this school. And it's that uncle who encouraged my father to come to Maseno. But coming wasn't an easy thing. He had to do an entrance exam to come to Maseno. Those days, only 60 students would be picked to join class 4 out of the whole of Nyanza and Western provinces. That was they sat for the exam in 1942. So imagine 60 people out of all the people who sat that exam in Western and Nyanza. So it's no surprise when you hear that there were 5 cabinet ministers and 6 professors, because these were the top cream of Nyanza and Western back then. So you should feel proud when you're here, that you should be proud of yourselves for being members of Maseno School. I also wanted to mention that I was quite intrigued when I heard you sing the anthem in English, because my father mentioned in the book, they used to sing it in Luo. That English version is a translation. Maseno has come a long way, but when you get to read the book, it would be interesting for you to get to know the history behind that song. And it used to be sung with passion. And when we are done, I would really like to hear you guys sing it with passion, because I didn't see the passion. You need to sing it with more passion, even if it's in honor of the people who passed through this school. They used to sing that song with a lot of passion. So today, I've just come to donate books to the school. I'm donating 10 books to you, and I hope you get to read them. Yeah, so This book is a very interesting book, as Isaac mentioned to you, and it cuts across all generations. You as students, you should be able to enjoy. You get to see the things one of your old boys used to do when he was here in Maseno, the mischief he got into, and how he got out of trouble, how he was lucky sometimes, how at times he was punished, but how in the end he succeeded and lived a full life after Maseno. But ideally, the ideals of Maseno are what shaped his life, and I just want to encourage you to keep on, what's the motto? Is it perseverance? What's the motto? And what's it in Luo? It used to be said in Luo as well. Do you know? Could someone say it? Yes, again? Say it again. Yes. So that is Maseno of old, when it was still here with the Nyanza students, but now it's a national school, and now the motto has changed to English, but it's just a translation from the Luo version. So it's nice meeting all of you. It's a pity I didn't come to Maseno. When I read the book, I had some regrets, because back in 1994, end of 1994, when I was in class 7, my father brought me here, and he gave me an extensive tour of the school. You see these big trees out here? He told me they are the ones who grew those trees when he was a student here. They were already big like this in 1994. And when he was here in the 40s, the trees were this young. They are the ones who grew them. And he showed me his house. Do you still have Mackay dormitory around? Do you still have it? Yeah, he was an old boy of Mackay, and the dormitory prefect, and the deputy school captain of the school. He was deputy school captain in 1949. So unfortunately, he seemed to want to influence me to write the school, but Alliance High School was screaming louder, so I wrote Alliance and made it there. But I always consider Maseno as the father of Alliance. So even though Alliance people like to say they went to Alliance, Maseno people should be proud. You should be proud and say, I went to Maseno school. So it's nice engaging you again.
So I'll put it this way. You cannot know your future if you do not know your past. Okay? You cannot know your future if you do not know your past. And this is a saying that many people just, throw it around carelessly. But it's a saying that if you don't appreciate its wisdom early in life, you end up suffering a lot. You end up paying for it a lot. Because what understanding where you come from, what understanding your origins does, is that it gives you something called perspective. One of the excellent things about this book, it is probably the most brilliant story about mentorship I have ever seen in the Kenyan context. Because the gentleman being mentioned by Robert over here, who was an alumnus of this school, I think in the 20s or 30s, John Robert Angawa, the mentorship he provided to this gentleman is responsible for a huge portion of what he was able to do. And the support that was given, when you read and understand the support, how John Robert was supporting Robert through every stage of his life, it leaves an impact in terms of how the sorts of lives that we should lead, not only as individuals, but also in our families, and not just in our nuclear families, but also in our extended families. There are relevant lessons there, because what John Robert Angawa did in the 1940s is what has established the KALIECH family. I don't know if the nickname given to them is the KALIECH, but in the wider political sphere, for you guys, Dr. William Odongo Mamo, that's what put the family on such a strong foundation.
Okay, that's a good question. So my background is, so for my undergraduate, I studied international business administration, and then I mastered in strategic management. I have an MBA in strategic management. So my professional career has involved, I was initially in the stock exchange. I was doing portfolio management. That came from my studies in MBA. I did that for a while. Then when my dad passed away, he had some farms that he had left behind, large-scale farms. So it needed some management to be pumped in. So I took over the management of one of his farms, and my expertise as a strategic manager helped me with that. So I've been doing management of a large-scale farm and putting in all that I learned in school every now and then. My interactions with my fellow students in the past has had a big impact in my life. Let me just use practical examples. From the Alliance High School community, when I needed to edit this book, I looked for an old boy of the Alliance High School, and that came from Engineer Kiluti over here. That was because our old boy club of former members of the Alliance High School is very strong, and we're active members of the community. That's how we got to meet each other. You won't believe it, I left Alliance High School in 1999, and Engineer Kiluti left Alliance High School in 2006. So there's a big gap, but because of our network from the school, we were able to work together to produce this book. In my university life, Albert here, the videographer, was with me in university. When I need events covered, I just look over to Albert. And what I could call it is social capital. You need to build a wide and big social capital. Do not ignore your networks from Maseno when you leave Maseno school. Keep in touch. Now we're in the digital world. You will realize later in life, because I've realized that, right now I'm 40, I'm an old man. But anytime I have any professional thing that's needed, I tap into the Alliance High School networks. When I need an architect, I just pick up my phone. I have a former classmate who's an architect. If I need engineering work, I pick up the phone and call an engineer who I was with in school. When I'm sick, I have a wide pool of doctors who are former classmates. And likewise, in their case, when they need any help, like right now, my newfound career path is more like a writer. When they need any advice on that, I'm the guy to go to now. Okay, so we're waiting for the band because I gave a special request that I really need to hear you guys sing that school anthem with the zeal that my father spoke about in this book. I want to relive that moment in the 40s. I want to see it myself with you guys here.
Kabla tupate ombi la mwisho, kuna vitabu ambavyo tunatunukiwa leo Namkaribisha Robert, karibu.